Hey everyone, and welcome to another Star Wars Doctrine podcast. It's me, Logan. I'm here with me, as always, is Cody. We are playing some Battlefront tonight as we podcast, so it's going to be slightly different. We're getting to do a nice live podcast, which we've never done before. You excited?
Pretty fun. It's like a little more pressure, you know?
Yeah, don't screw this
Live.
up. That'll be really awkward.
Super embarrassing.
But with this, we've been super busy working on our trivia challenge that we just posted this week and have just started up. So I've been working on that for the last 2 or 3 weeks pretty regularly, so we haven't had enough time to put into our normal podcast as well. So we're able to think of this as a substitute, and hopefully it goes well, just in case we are unable to meet up for podcasts or need to be extra careful with this social distancing going on right now.
Good way to do it.
Make sure to go check out our YouTube for our latest trivia challenge to see if you think it's fun. Let us know what you think, and if you are interested, contact us, and maybe you can be on the next trivia challenge show. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about Count Dooku for our podcast.
Yeah, so we recently put out a post there on Instagram, and looks like we got quite a few, people commenting between Instagram and Facebook on it. And basically, what the post says is, it's a question about Count Dooku and whether or not you believe he really was a true Sith Lord, whether he gave himself fully to the dark side, and like the other Sith have in the past. We know that his eyes didn't turn yellow, which is just something that gets talked about a lot or debated and stuff, and it's kind of just a fun thing to talk about, and so yeah, we kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the catalyst for that is in the movies. We never see Count Dooku's eyes turn yellow. However, they do in one or two episodes of the Clone Wars. Count Dooku's eyes do actually turn yellow briefly, which is very interesting.
Yes, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that, and obviously I've seen the episodes. I just either forgot, didn't realize, but someone on the comments who mentioned that, and that was interesting. I just genuinely didn't know that at all.
I totally did not notice that at all when I had seen... I don't even remember if I've seen this episode. I'm sure I have, but just from... I do not remember that happening at all. It must not have clicked or
Right.
I guess noticed it, but when I was doing my research for this video, I stumbled across that kind of factoid and was like, huh, well that's awkward. Did not know that.
Yeah,
but anyway,
that's
something
crazy.
I think is
Go ahead,
interesting besides like that fact is like, I mean, just the idea that in the past that has been such a trait of Sith, right? You have this yellow eyes that just seems to be the marking, the yellow and red, and Anakin in episode 3 as he, through different acts, not throughout the entirety of episode 3 as he's Darth Vader, but like in different acts his eyes are portrayed as that Sith coloring with the red and the yellow, like when he storms the Jedi Temple, or when he's just destroying all the Separatists, straight wrecking all of them. See you, Redcorn, thanks for hanging out. But it's kind of interesting that Anakin's eyes weren't always like that. When he's talking to Padme, for example, he looks emotionally unstable, but he doesn't look like a Sith.
Right, and so that was interesting. I guess, and I don't know how to take this, but the Sith eyes, right? Because is it something that is thought to be permanently there, or is it something that is only there when they become angry and actually are using the dark side at the exact time? You know what I'm saying? Because obviously Palpatine doesn't always have yellow eyes either. Maul
except
kind
for
of
once he's declared himself
does.
as Sidious, he does.
Yeah.
As soon as he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm an evil Sith Lord," he's full on Sith eyes.
Right. I suppose, like, and I don't know if I would assume it's Legends now, but I'd always heard a story about how he actually already had the yellow eyes and was just covering it up, like
I would
using
assume
the
that is
Force.
most accurate.
Yeah, because Yeah, because it almost looks like the lightning made him get the yellow eyes, but that just doesn't really.
That's definitely not correct. That wouldn't make
Yeah, it
sense,
doesn't
right? I mean,
seem
he's been a Sith
correct.
for 30,
Right.
40, probably closer to 40 years at that point. We don't have exact numbers with the Plagueis novel being all legends now, but that doesn't
Right.
seem likely, I guess, that him electrocuting himself would give him Sith eyes. That would just be random.
Yeah.
And how I had always interpreted that before was that Sidious actually... when I was a kid, I guess this was more of my interpretation, was that Sidious was actually super old. Not, you know, the 60 or however old. He's around 60 during the Revenge of the Sith, so, like, he's actually not that old. But I always assumed he was just, like, super old and was preserving himself through the Force, and that was kind of like a get-up, and he didn't actually look like he did as Sheev. Like, when he was Sheev, the Chancellor, the Senator, that was not his actual appearance. He actually looked all
Right.
Scythian, like we are used to seeing him as the Emperor from the original trilogy. And then when he had his encounter with Mace Windu, it was extremely taxing on him, and he was no longer able to keep up that facade.
I like that a lot.
But that's not
actually.
necessarily true, just because, I mean, I don't think he looked like that all the time, but I don't know. That's how I always had interpreted as being younger when I had seen the movies.
Yeah.
And not knowing some exact facts,
like
like the
that.
fact that Sidious was a human male who was around 60 at the time. Like, that's not just what 60-year-olds look like.
Right.
But
Yeah. That's a good point. Thinking of like before the prequels, like we had seen such small amounts of Sidious, like that I suppose like, and he was always hooded, you know. So it's interesting.
yeah, we had a video call with him, and
Right. Right.
play as Count Dooku for the stream. It seems important.
And that's a good point. And as the original one too looked even almost even weirder and grosser. The one that was like actually I think played by a girl.
It was played
Before
by a girl,
they-
yes.
Was it? Yeah, that's
Before
what,
Ian McDiarmid was cast for Episode 6.
right. And then
But
they went back
anyways,
and
moving on to
changed it.
Dooku. Dooku, in the films, does not have yellow eyes, but he also seems slightly different. Just a few other points, right? We know that Dooku
Right.
was a Jedi Master, something that not even Darth Vader himself did.
Hey, he's throwing shade at my boy.
But Dooku was a very accomplished master. And from
Yeah.
the Dooku Fallen Jedi, or Lost Jedi, sorry, novel, right? I think it's Lost Jedi.
Wait, Jedi Lost.
Jedi Lost. I was like, wait, it's not quite Lost Jedi. The Jedi Lost Dooku novel. We know that he was... We know a little bit more about his upbringing and kind of like his story. And part of that was he had always kind of felt drawn to the dark side, even as a very young apprentice. But he was a very accomplished, very skilled, and respected, even Jedi Knight. And ultimately became a Jedi Master, which is a huge deal, and hence why he was considered one of the Lost 20, which were people who had
Right.
actually achieved the rank of Master and then left the Order, either by force or willingly left. Which is interesting just because it's not like Ahsoka wouldn't count as the Lost 20 because she never achieved the rank of Master. And there would
Right,
likely
or
be other
Beresaki
Padawans, or Beresaki, right? There's others that throughout time had chosen to leave the Order, but hadn't quite reached the rank of Master. I think that just kind of says something about Dooku, that he had been a powerful Jedi. I mean, that takes many years to reach the rank of Master, and usually kind of great achievements and accomplishments to pull something off like that.
Right. Respected council member. I mean, just crazy.
The dude had a resume as a Jedi. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think that definitely plays a part into it. You know, as you bring that up, like, you wonder if his masterfulness of the light side of the Force played into his role. You know, and how
Right, because there's a
how
reason
that
when people
relayed
turn,
over
right?
to him. For sure. And I guess that's a good part too, you know, like Vader had his reasons for turning and they're obviously
So
quite
Vader
a bit different than Count Dooku's.
So let's see, let's go through what the Sith we know. We'll pull legends a little bit here, starting with Palpatine. Palpatine, as a young boy, was, according to the Plagueis novel, super egotistical. Kind of thought he was better than everyone. Kind of hated his family. He was honestly a terrible human being before he was a Sith Lord. But
Yeah.
he was super angry. He thought he was better than everyone. And was kind of always seeking for ways to be better until he met Plagueis, and was kind of given the chance to become his apprentice, and took it gleefully, actually happily killing his entire family, especially his father, who he had a terrible relationship with, and being honestly very thrilled to have the
Stand-up
opportunity
guy.
to murder his whole family. So Sidious, honestly, I think is pretty much as Sithy as you can get. He had a ton of faith in
Right.
himself, was always seeking to be more powerful, better. He thought everyone was less than he was. Um, he that was probably his big reasons of just amassing power and a huge superiority complex, right?
Right, which is, yeah, like you said, it's everything that a Sith Lord is supposed to embody. So,
Okay, so then we have next is Darth Maul. Now Darth Maul I do think has a lot of great traits for being a Sith, but doesn't exactly have the whole choice factor that our other Sith do.
right, he's kind of just brought into it.
Right, so Darth Maul's kidnapped as a kid.
Kind of like kidnapped, yeah.
As a baby, really. He was like full Jedi ordered on this crap. So, and then just basically raised by Sidious to be a hating machine.
Right.
So, I mean, he was grown up to be a Sith, so he didn't really have much choice, but he did, as he kind of grew into it, he was super motivated. He hated anyone who had ever, in his mind, wronged him or deprived him of power or his,
Not the
rightful
kind of guy
place.
to forget.
Yeah, so that part, I do think he embodied a lot of what it was to be a Sith, right? He held on to his hatred, and that was kind of who he was as a Sith Lord, and as a, I guess, post-Sith Lord, he was stuck up on that. He felt he deserved the title of Sith, and hated anyone who basically took that away from him. Hating for his extreme rage about Kenobi, and also his continuous desire to overturn the Sith for Palpatine, in his mind, wronging him by giving up on him after his duel with Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And then Anakin. I think it's easy
Anakin's
to
an interesting one,
romanticize
too.
Anakin.
Right.
Because, he definitely did it for love, right? I mean, I think
Absolutely.
that's fair. But I also can't... Oh no, poor Dooku's gonna die in his stream. I also can't, in a right
There we go.
mind,
Oh,
say that...
Yoda.
I can't in my right mind say that Anakin was not motivated by power. Or even that his love and desire to
Right.
save Padme wasn't really motivated by a deeper desire to be super powerful and to have control.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to selfishness too. You know, I think it was as much as he loved Padme. At the end of the day, I do feel like he loved Padme, of course. But at the end of the day, sometimes you wonder if it was more about he didn't want to live without her. Like, he actually says that. He's like, I can't live without her. It wasn't like, I can't bear to see her go through that pain. It was like,
Right.
I need her. Like, it was very selfishly motivated, and once again, some of those Sith-like embodiments.
I do think it's
And yeah, like
interesting,
you said, power to
It
control.
was like you were saying, it was honestly him saving Padme had a lot more to do with him than it did her, I think. Because
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
as soon as he's like, I have a vision, you die in childbirth, Padme's first concern is the child, right? It's not herself, despite the fact that she was just told, hey, you're probably going to die because my visions weren't wrong last time.
Great point.
She was like, what about the baby?
difference in qualities.
And that wasn't important to Anakin. That honestly didn't seem to cross his mind. He's like, I don't know. And then he immediately moves on to like, I'm gonna find a way to
Won't
save
let this
you,
happen to you.
and then I won't
Yeah.
let this happen. Like, it's all me. I'm gonna find the power. And rather than
Well, and
asking for
how?
help, he just goes straight to finding how he can stop it. Right? He doesn't even ask Palpatine. Who's
Right.
like, "Hey, there's this power." He's like, "Well, could you save Padme for me?" He's like, "How can I learn this power?" So that seems very selfish again.
Yeah, and like who would think that they need to take that upon themselves anyways? Like if you were told today like, hey, something bad's gonna happen, it's like he
Yeah, my
just the
first
first
thought
thing he
wouldn't be
assumes
like,
is
"How can I fix it?"
like I need to become more powerful, but it's like I think that was already set in place by his mom dying, everything, and he felt like, I'm not gonna let this happen again because I can't deal with this. And yeah, it's interesting.
Right?
So
So I
there's
think
his
that's a good.
motivations.
There's his. Now Count Dooku. What does Count Dooku go through? So Count Dooku obviously felt this way to the dark side through his entire life. As a youngling, he was kind of obsessed with understanding. He seemed very motivated by knowledge, but he wanted to be able to. What's the word? He was super obsessed with looking at the dark side relics that the Jedi had. That was a big thing to him, was like understanding more about the dark side and things like that. So he definitely
Right.
had some issues, and he was kind of, I feel like, grew up with a superiority complex that had almost nothing to do with him actually being a count. More so just the fact that he was better than everyone else as a youngling. I think probably similar to what Anakin went through. I mean, Anakin growing up as the chosen one. Dooku grew up as the best fighter since who would eventually be his master, Master Yoda, who was the best fighter in the history of the Order. So that's probably a little bit of weight, kind of knowing that, hey, I'm this powerful and things like that, and the dark side shows him about power.
Yeah, a little similar, like you said, to the whole fact of coming in, being like you told you're the chosen one, and so for sure. Take real quick, if you don't mind, take this question here, or sorry, this response in the chat from Master Yodog. He says, "I feel like he wasn't a true Sith Lord like Sidious or Plagueis or even Darth Vader or Maul, because for one, he was raised as a Jedi for most of his life, and I don't think he gave himself fully to the dark side. Some of him did, obviously, but maybe not all."
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good point. He was raised as a Jedi, which I would assume, even though ultimately, if he chose to make some pretty terrible decisions and kill a lot of innocent people, he was raised with like a good foundation, maybe that probably stuck with him to an extent.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like his intentions, like Sidious or Palpatine, for example. It's not like Dooku's intentions were always bad. He's not the kind of guy that like,
He's a
it
political
was just a
idealist, not a
terrible
murderer.
person.
Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and the Jedi. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, people who served on the council with him didn't expect him to be a Sith Lord because, like Mundy said, he's a political idealist. He left the Order for political ideas and disagreements on kind of politics and some of the ways they handled things. You wouldn't go, okay, this guy's gonna go full murderer and full Sith Lord on us now. And
Right.
it's interesting. It makes you wonder.
And I think that is interesting because he did leave the Order because, one, he felt swayed by the dark side. He felt like that he was actually being pulled to the dark side, and he was like, this is bad, and in my position of power, that's not what I need to be feeling. And he like kind of did the right thing, I feel like, even
Sure.
though that ultimately led to his downfall. But I do think he did
Yeah.
the quote unquote right thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like along the way, obviously, got thwarted and got confused, got tempted, but it makes you wonder how much of it was a means to an end, right? Like I believe maybe he saw becoming a Sith more as a way to fix the things that he thought were wrong with the governments, with the Republic and everything, opposed to like, hey, I just I just need power. I need to control everyone. I don't know. It makes you wonder if things had played out differently.
Yeah.
Or if let's say the Separatists won the war that they never had a chance of winning because Palpatine was behind the whole thing. But had that happened, right? Like, it just makes you wonder, what would Dooku have done? Would he have continued in his ways? Would he have tried to actually make a peaceful government? Like, how deep into this was he?
I mean, he was already killing lots of people, so I do think he's definitely a bad guy and responsible for many deaths. But I do think
for sure.
There was, I mean, his moment with Obi-Wan, which was, I think, one of the coolest reveals in Attack of the Clones in its entirety, was the reveal of him being Qui-Gon Jinn's master.
Qui-Gon's master.
But before that, the relevant information is he literally tells Obi-Wan, he's like, hey, the Sith Lords are literally controlling the Republic. Don't you think that's an issue? Like, it's bad.
Even though he was in on it.
And he's like, I wish it wasn't this way, but this is honestly just the way things are. And that seems kind of like very realistic. And he talks about the corruption. He literally seems to think like, hey, like, things are bad, and this is maybe the only way they get better. So you could argue that sort of standpoint. Though I don't think that's necessarily fair to say that he was just, fighting his cause and doing what he thought was right, because there was these moments where when he's fighting Anakin and Obi-Wan, he's literally taking pleasure in proving that he's still a superior fighter.
Well, and it very well could have started off more that way than it ended up being that way, because as we know, the dark side is tempting and the power gets stronger and it overtakes you slowly but surely. But yeah, definitely, could have started that way, because he probably recognized, when he came into contact with Palpatine, found out who he really was, he probably understood this guy is a powerful figure, like.
Well, and he was always drawn to power, being a super successful and skilled Jedi. Like, I think it'd be pretty unfair to say that a lot of Jedi who are in positions of power weren't drawn to it or didn't somewhat enjoy it.
Oh, for sure. And he seems, and that's actually what the Emperor, what Sidious says, right? Is even the Jedi are scared to lose their power, but yeah, like you said, I like the one thing you said just a little bit ago. Dooku was kind of like, hey, this is how it is. He's just accepting that. He's just kind of accepting, though, that like this is one thing that it is what it is, and I don't know that I can necessarily change it, but how can I make the best of this situation,
Right.
And then Qui-Gon, being his apprentice, he makes the quip that Qui-Gon would have joined him, and obviously Obi-Wan's very defiant to that, saying like Qui-Gon would have never joined you, and it is interesting because a lot of their ideas, obviously being master and apprentice, are similar. Qui-Gon feels kind of the way about the Council, about the politics, about the Jedi that Dooku did, but the difference was kind of how they chose to handle everything.
Right.
I don't think that Qui-Gon would have joined Dooku in the dark side, and
I honestly
even though
don't
they had similar...
know if Dooku was saying that for Obi-Wan to join the dark side. Like, it almost doesn't seem like his invitation was his invitation to me. That's what I was actually going to say next. Was I think his invitation was more like, we can stop how messed up this all is. We can overthrow the Sith.
Do you think he genuinely would have tried to do that?
I think to an extent. I don't think Dooku would ever have given up his power, though I don't think power to him ever meant ruling. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest points of what really makes a Sith, was craving power of being in control and having no one over you, and being maybe completely free.
Oh yeah,
right? Because Dooku wasn't that guy.
No.
He didn't want the title of the master.
Yeah.
And he didn't like being a count. He didn't care about it. That wasn't a big deal.
Right. That's
The
what I'm saying.
only
If he
reason he
wanted
goes
that, if
and
that's what he
claims
craved.
his title is because he does it to help his sister, because his brother's a
Right.
tool. And then once he becomes Count Dooku again, he's honestly just like, whatever. And he doesn't really act on his power or do anything about it. He actually kind of disappears. So I think it's just kind of interesting that Dooku didn't want, like, he liked, I think, being... He liked being the cool kid in class, you know? He liked being the guy who could beat you in the game of the lightsaber fight, or, you know, the first guy picked for the on all the teams or whatever. Like, that's my comparison, but he didn't necessarily want to be the head. He didn't want that power. He wanted to be cool, and do the right thing. But I do think there's like that saying, you know, the pathway to hell intentions. Honestly,
Oh, you just got super quiet on mine.
it's fine. The pathway to hell is paved with good intentions, so like it doesn't really matter if Dooku is trying to do good things. He ultimately chose to do several Sith things and embodied several parts of it. And maybe he wasn't as malicious or ever would have been the Dark Lord of the Sith. He never would have overthrown Palpatine, but, you know, I guess he still was a pretty bad guy and still, I think, worthy of the title of a Sith apprentice.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Read a couple of the comments from Instagram that stuck out to me. One of the... Let me see here. Find a good one here. So this person, his name is o.no.xo. A Force user's eyes only turn yellow if they're in a state of rage or hatred. Sidious let the hate flow through him, and Maul was always in a state of rage. So that was kind of referring to the Sith eyes. I thought that was an interesting point. And like I said, I don't know if there's any canon to necessarily back that up, but it could explain a little bit of that.
The legends would be I think, and probably I feel like a lot of this concept would still be canon, is that the dark side literally corrupts the user's body. As they use it, it takes a toll on them. It's painful. It's bad. Like, for example, in the Darth Bane trilogy, that's a good example of talking about the effects of the dark side. Is Bane mentions that dark side users would literally, if compared to a light side user, they would just destroy their own body given the chance, because of how demanding the dark side is. So it wears them out. It just destroys them, and that's why Sith were kind of trying to find ways to preserve their body and achieve immortality, is because their body literally couldn't keep up with the power that they would amass. So I think that was one of the reasons I've heard before, saying that was kind of a sign of the dark side actively corrupting your body, and that drawing of the dark side was your Sith eyes. So if Dooku didn't have them, you could say maybe that same concept like still existed. He wasn't maybe actively always drawing on the dark side to let it corrupt him.
Yeah. There's two more comments kind of on that same thing. A-Ray 2019 on Instagram. Maybe he was fighting the evil within himself, which is interesting. And then Ahsoka Tano Battlefront 2 on Instagram says he had pure focus of his goals and he never needed to be manipulated like Maul or Anakin. And I think that's a good point. Kind of ties into that if that's true, you know, he's more focused on his goals. Maybe he knew what the dark side could do to him, and he wanted to try and limit that the best he could.
That's an interesting point, with how much we've been talking about how Dooku studied and was desirous to learn about the dark side he knew what it did to you. There's like the concept of what he could learn, and I guess ultimately how it could just hurt him. He would have been very well aware of those effects.
Right. That's not to say that he wasn't still maybe manipulated a little bit by, one, the dark side, and two, even Palpatine, but maybe not
definitely manipulated by Palpatine. Who wasn't manipulated by Palpatine?
Right. Exactly. Uh,
Palpatine was manipulated by
see it
Palpatine.
in his eyes when he could see it in his eyes when Anakin tells Anakin's about to kill him, and Palpatine says, "Do it." But yeah, no, for sure. And I just think that that's a strong possibility, you know. And obviously, his eyes might have showed every once in a while through that. Um,
Right. I mean,
or
we have
you
our
could also
episode of Clone
play
Wars to show that it did happen at least once.
exactly. And you could also play into the theory that if Palpatine's able to use the Force to disguise himself so other people can't see his Sith-like appearance, that possibly Dooku
Do you think Dooku was
could have
actively
done the
doing
same
that all
thing
the
as
time
well.
then?
It's definitely a theory. If the Palpatine one exists, why wouldn't that be able to?
Right.
But I don't. I think.
Terrible life.
I think I like the idea that he just had more pure focus on his goals, because becoming a Sith was a way to accomplish his goals, and and maybe he knew a little bit more
And
about
just
what it could
being
do.
aware,
I like
being
that
aware of
theory
what
better.
it was.
Right.
I think that's a big
you know,
thing. Because I think
like
a lot of
that
people know why
better.
they joined the Sith. Anakin knows
Right.
why, but I think he might have been unable to understand what would happen, I guess.
True. Exactly. And I believe Anakin, at the point
Ouch.
of desperation he was at, he was trying to fully give himself to the dark side. I think that's why he killed the younglings, why he did what he did, because he thought the only way I can save Padme is if I do this, if I let the dark side consume me. And so that's maybe why we see
Then
his
I
eyes
can get
turning
the
yellow,
power.
because at that time, he really is. I mean, dude, you don't just go kill kids
And your friends.
after the stuff he's
people
been
you've
through, the
mentored.
friends. Right. Unless he really believes, like, this is the way, so I have to give myself all completely. You know,
Saying
I'm sure
this
there's
is the
times
way?
of regret. This is the way.
When Anakin told the
Young
clone troopers
is
the
the way,
501st,
geez.
he's like, so this is the way. This is the way. Yep.
I got another comment here from Master Yodog. I feel like the more of the Sith things Count Dooku did were ultimately to please his master Sidious. Without him, I don't think he would have done most of the things he did.
That's an interesting
yeah.
take.
You do have
Yeah,
a degree of needing to obey your master if you want to get the things done you want done as well, because Palpatine always was the more powerful, and Dooku knew that. Dooku understood his role.
Yeah, he understood he was the apprentice and how that all worked. He understood the gameplay. Probably, again, from studying and again from being, having eyes and understanding what his role was in the... He knew who he was in the group. That's interesting. I guess
His
he definitely had motives, right, that were his own, but something like killing all the Jedi, like, that probably wasn't, like, his favorite thing to do. I mean, he does even seem to
Right.
express remorse about the idea of having to order the battle droids to attack Count Dooku, or to attack Mace Windu, who throughout his entire tenure as a Jedi, or I guess Mace Windu's because Count Dooku is older, but throughout their entire, like, kind of tenure together, they never got along. They were always fierce
Right.
rivals. They didn't agree on political ideals. They were both tied, basically, for second in command to Yoda and second
To
in
Yoda.
skill.
right, they're essentially like rivals as much as you could be.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that he seems, like, remorseful about the concept and calls even Mace Windu his old friend, like... I
Yeah.
think that's kind of maybe significant about why he did some of the things that I guess we count him as a Sith Lord for. So that's a good point, Master Yodog. I like
That,
it.
yeah, I like that too, and I like the idea of him, like, looking at him as like a fallen Jedi opposed to just like, I don't know.
Just a Sith, just another
just-
Sith. He's so
yeah.
different. He really is.
Exactly, and his story's so good, and I would love to get more of him as a Jedi. You know, obviously, like, it would be a dream to have a novel or something of like Yoda training him and like how he was as an apprentice, and just, I don't know, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, my dream
He's
was
such a
always
cool character. He's
Qui-Gon Jinn, like, solo standalone movie, because I think that'd be so cool with... So you
yeah,
get to learn about Qui-Gon, but also you'd get to see, like, his master fall in his eyes, and I just think that'd be a cool way to portray Dooku instead of just a Dooku film. I would also be okay with a Dooku film, is what I'm saying.
right. Well, Master and Apprentice dives a little bit into some flashbacks, Qui-Gon as an apprentice, and
Right.
and Dooku as his master, and there's some very cool stuff with that. Once again, talking about how Dooku and Qui-Gon both got into the prophecies a lot of the holocrons that were within the temple, and also there's like a really cool scene, you know, without spoiling really anything. It's not a big spoiler. It's just a cool scene that where you get to see Dooku pretty much saves Qui-Gon's life and doesn't necessarily have to kill the person, the unarmed person, but he does anyways, just to kind of almost out of rage or power for almost killing the person. Almost killed Qui-Gon, and
Dooku's kind of pissed about the situation.
yeah, Dooku didn't need to kill him at the end. They, you know, they were disarmed and stuff. And,
It's a neat
but he
parallel to
does.
Anakin.
Exactly, to his death, right? And you just kind of see that little side of like even when Dooku's a Jedi, you know, he kind of had his
Oh,
own way of doing
rockets.
things, and
But yeah, so
stuff like that.
it seems like we can agree that Dooku was kind of on the path since the get-go, but really he wasn't. To say as bad, I think, is unfair, but he didn't really possess a lot of the traits that we kind of associate, and the drive, really, that we associate with Sith. I think that's fair, right? He didn't seem to have the drive to be the Sith Master. He didn't have the drive to be fully powerful, and he didn't seem to have the drive to really do a lot of the things that he was doing for personal gain or to actually inflict this pain upon his enemies, which would contrast where Sidious or Palpatine just seemed to enjoy any opportunity to attack people and hurt people, and that was a fail, Logan. Trash.
Let me read one more comment that I've looking for. It's from S. Instagram. Said Dooku left the Jedi Order because he thought it was corrupted. He did all the wrong things for all the right reasons. So is he even a Sith? He didn't really even practice Sith religion. Pretty straightforward guy. And I agree with the first part of that, where, you know, him doing the wrong things, but for the right reasons, right? It's like there's a line you have to draw. Like what's it gonna take to get the right thing done? And sometimes, you know, if you do the wrong things for the right reasons, well, you're still doing the wrong things.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you know, maybe his intentions were good, and that's why it's such a complicated,
Such a complicated issue with Dooku is he does seem to have he has so many likable qualities and had so many bad things happen to him that just, I mean, one of the tipping points was him losing his apprentice, like, and we saw, like, in that story you shared, he was pissed when
Right.
Qui-Gon's life was threatened to the point of just killing someone unnecessarily, and that was one of the huge tipping points, is when ultimately the Jedi Order kind of cost, like, the Jedi Order in a way really cost Qui-Gon his life, is because they didn't believe that the issue was worth getting involved in too much. So,
Yeah,
Dooku,
a lot of ignorance, a lot of
the guy who wanted to do the right things, but ultimately made a lot of the wrong choices. So, still a bad guy, but very likable.
Do you think Sidious? I actually already have an answer for this in my head, but do you think Sidious knew or felt that? I mean, he obviously had Vader in mind as a apprentice to rule the galaxy with, and he was slowly planting seeds in Anakin's mind throughout the entire time Anakin was a Jedi. But
Right.
you know, I heard someone say Dooku was like a placeholder Sith for Anakin. You know, he was someone just holding the place until Anakin was ready to be turned, and I think that's true. And it seems like Palpatine may have always kind of planned that. It was like, this is a good guy to have as a placeholder, because, you know, he's probably not ever going to become more powerful than me. He's maybe not even driven enough in the Sith way to try and overpower me.
Right.
He's a good person to do
Right,
what I
he's a
need him to do. He's got a role, and that's a perfect,
Right.
it's a perfect wording and example, I suppose.
So that was that your question?
I guess I was just saying if turned into a statement, but I guess I
Yes,
was just
Micro
saying
K.
more. Do you agree with that, and if you think that
Yeah, no,
Do you think that Palpatine always had that as a plan?
I don't think he was a true apprentice. I think he was just there. That he was Palpatine used him. He needed Dooku's influence, his suave, to accrue the Separatist army. I don't think he would have been able to do it without Dooku. So I think he honestly recruited Dooku to as more of just like a general than a real apprentice. So I think even
That's
from
a good
that way,
point.
you could say that even Palpatine didn't count Dooku as a real Sith Lord. So if Palpatine doesn't count him, neither should we. Well, cool. We had some fun tonight. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks for participating both on the stream and on our Instagram. Probably pull from our Facebook for our next video, but thanks for hanging out. If you want to, feel free to check us out on Twitch, where we might do our next live stream, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, may the Force be with you. Thanks for hanging out, guys.